It was 2008 in the southern suburb of Memphis, Tennessee, and we had a roof collapse from a tornado that affected Tennessee. And we got the job at that point, the job of a lifetime. So what I did was, hey, welcome back to Disaster Podcaster for Season 4. I want to tell you about a unique project that we did today, but really more about how it came about to kind of enlighten you and inspire you that you never know when a call is going to come in and what it's going to be. 2008, a tornado ripped through Tennessee from northern, I want to say Franklin, down through Memphis and into Mississippi a little bit, Tupelo. So it was a pretty bad tornado. I don't remember the size, but we got called out. One of our clients had this distribution center. So it's probably about a 80,000 square foot tilt wall, 28, 32 foot ceilings, and they had a pretty massive roof collapse. And this was a fulfillment center. So inside were a lot of and there's a lot of electronic goods. So it happened to be a center for electronics, consumer and industrial electronics. Our task, because the tornado and the roof damage was so bad, that they were going to have to tear this building down. So our task and job was to try to retrieve and salvage everything we could meticulously. So I get called out. This is a pretty cold time of year. I think this was early fall. And so I look at the roster and I called Joe. Joe lives in North Carolina. He's closest. He's good on equipment. We're going to be using a lot of skid steers, reach lulls, scissor lifts, and things like that. So we get out there, we meet with the property, we get the scope lined out. Interesting enough, this was not really a bid job. They just said, give us a ROM, but the job is yours to have. This wasn't something we were up against a couple of other companies. This was just a regular big property management company that hired us to get this thing done because they had to get the building scrubbed and demoed in a certain period of time. So we're there working. It was interesting. The building was full of, and this was 2008. It actually had like 20 pallets full of Apple iPods. These were brand new. We had to have security. We had supplemental labor there. They weren't necessarily employees of our company, so we had a big issue with fear of theft. There were a lot of laptops, a lot of consumer electronics, right? So high value consumer electronics, and then there were a lot of industrial parts for major computer companies that were also there. We were just trying to salvage what we could. They had a representative of the distribution center there, as well as a few product reps that were like the end user, because this was like they were distributing for other companies. And there were a couple of different people there. We set up little stations outside. It was rainy. It was a bad time of year, dangerous. So outside of the building, we set up little pods where each one of the representatives could have like a pop-up tent. It had sides on it. We had a heater. And they had tables with lights so they could, inspect and get their computers up, had their Wi-Fi going on hotspot cards and stuff. So we were extracting these things out there. It was pretty dangerous. We had to go slow. It was going slower than anybody wanted, but there was so much roof damage. We had been cleared to go in, but the fire marshal was certainly always there. OSHA stopped in many times. We had inspections. We had to correct some things. We were having to watch a lot of the safety, but we were in there just meticulously pulling out some pallets and taking it out. And then they had tractor trailers that were taking that off to someplace else. But I was proud of the job. We salvaged a few $1 million worth of products for our people. And I think what's important here to understand was we're talking about commercial this year. You've heard me talk about this before. Business interruption and salvageability is a huge value proposition for what you charge. So we were charging X. It was costing us a good bit of money to have me and my team and the equipment that we had on site and some of the logistics to set it up. But none of that really mattered because we were saving millions of dollars. If we couldn't salvage one pallet of these some kind of little computer chips, the guy with that manufacturer or distributor or, whoever sold those told me that pallet was probably worth $600,000-$700,000. So they were watching us, be careful. We're pulling it off the shelves and taking it out. But that job wasn't what I'm talking about today. What's interesting is we were wrapping up. I think we had done a walkthrough, and there were some areas where the products were just demolished. We couldn't get them, so they were documented. They were doing their inventory and everything like that. We were getting them in there safe and sound and out. We were wrapping up. I want to say that we were planning on demobilization the next day. Myself and Joe were sitting in the parking lot, or we were loading a truck, or our staff was cleaning some equipment, or we were waiting on, whatever we were doing. I don't remember this because the next moment kind of hit me right between the eyes. Okay. So we're out there. I think we were waiting on Sunbelt to pick up their equipment. So it was that day. I stayed on town because we had a few other projects going on, but this is the one that was most critical. It was raining. We were ready to go home. It had been about a week. Yeah, about a week. And it was just ready to go home. It was grueling, long days. We were racing against the clock. And the pace was sunlight to sunlight. So we were out there. I think I might have been sitting in the rental vehicle or truck or something. And I see a gentleman walking across the parking lot towards us from a warehouse that was next door that dwarfed the one we were working in. I would say the building we were working in was about 60 to 80,000 square feet. The one next to it was 400,000, and it was fenced off. The tornado had collapsed it. They had a roof collapse. But it was a different type of building where ours had like a metal roof and it was much smaller. This was a full tilt wall and looked like a third of the building had collapsed and caved in. And it was off limits. We'd been hearing rumors from the neighborhood that there had been a few fatalities. Wasn't sure how true that was, but someone's walking across some parking lot towards us from that direction. We didn't see where he came from. And he had on a long brown trench coat, like a taupe color. Looked like a federal G-man, except it wasn't a black trench coat. It was a tan sand color trench coat. And he's walking across. He's got his hood on, maybe an umbrella. And he comes over to the window and I, can I help you? He said, are you running this job site? And I said, I'm a contractor that's taking care of the recovery of this. And he goes, how's it going? Small talk. And I wasn't really comfortable telling this guy too much. And I was like, yeah, well, we're actually wrapping up and getting ready to go. He goes, well, that's good. Well, would you have a minute to walk over to the building next door with me and take a look at it? And I said, yeah, I'll go take a look at it with you. He goes, my name is XXX, and I'm with Smuckers, the Smuckers Corporation out of Ohio. They lease that building. And he tells me that he's a vice president of facilities for Smuckers, and that he's been called down to find someone that can help them with recovery of this place. And I said, well, that's a big building. I don't know what I'm looking at here. So we walk over and we get through the fence, and he has access, of course. Come to find out there were two fatalities and one relatively serious injury from the roof collapse from the tornado, because it happened near end of shift one day. And this had been 3 weeks since this had all happened, and it just got cleared for investigation and insurance reasons and whatnot. So we walked through, and we're walking up, and the way he wants to go look at it for some reason was, and it was really epic how it happened at the time. This is 2008. This is, gosh, what is that? 14 years ago? 16, a long time ago. I don't know the math. We walk up the collapsed tilt walls. Tilt walls are preformed concrete walls that are placed in place. They're pulled in place. They're lifted to make the building. They're seam cut and everything like that. But they had fallen in because the roof is part of the assembly. So we walk up, and I'm cresting this concrete wall. I don't know what I'm going to see inside. And as I get to a point where I have visibility inside the building now, because we had not seen it, there was no markings on the outside. We had no idea what was there. And I look inside, rows and rows and rows and pallets of food products stacked, sometimes 5 pallets high. Just this immense amount of that. But of course, what was closest to us, and it ended up being about a third or 28% of the building, everything in front of us was the roof had collapsed in it, and it was everywhere. So pallets of food, the muck and everything was everywhere. And he said, he looked at me and he said, "It's a lot." And I said, it's overwhelming. I said, "What are you trying to do here?" He says, he goes, "As of today, I have 33 days to get this out of here." You said, "Can you help us?" I said, "Well, of course." One of those times where you just say yes. I said, he goes, "I'm looking," he goes, "the building, property manager, they need to repair or whatever they're going to do with this building, but our contract has us able to get out. And after that day, the penalty for our being on site is extremely high. This product that we're looking at has to be disposed of. None of this is salvageable because we've had no climate control. It was in a tornado. It was an open breach building. FDA, I get it." He said, "What I'm going to need from you is, besides just removal of it, validation of destruction. I need the chain of custody where this stuff legitimately was taken to the landfill and not accessible to human consumption by any means." And I said, "Okay." I'd never done that. That's an actual process. So we walk in. He's like, "I'm here the rest of the day. I'm going to give you access. I'd like you to put together a number for me." And I said, "Okay, I'll put together a number." So I call back to corporate, have some conversations. I start walking around. This is 2008. Cell phones weren't really, smartphones were just coming. I think the first iPod had come out. So it's point and shoot cameras, pull the disc out, walking around, doing a little video, doing a little camera, just trying to get a feel for the place and get some help for some people because we had to start working on what the logistics were going to be. So call my wife and said, not gonna be home quite yet. She was expecting me to head home after the other job, and she said, "Not quite home quite yet." And let me stop here and say this to anybody that's watching. Those that have done this work gonna get this, but the real heroes, the real people that take the brute and the brutal challenges of this are the families of us. I did this for 18 years, and it doesn't really dawn on you, and you recognize it, but to have a spouse, it's probably no different than military, right? A spouse that's running the house, husband or wife, kids, illnesses, soccer games, your own water damages at home, dog going crazy, going to the vet, and you're away. Now, my whole career, I wasn't a stay-on-site director. There was a lot of times, depending on the job and the client, that I would spend more time than not. Especially early in my career, I was on that job until it finished, project manager. But as a project director, I was putting together the original number, setting up communications, kind of helping with getting the job lined up, and then would disappear, go home for a bit or go to another job, or I always had a couple jobs going on. But sometimes they were just so hectic, so important that the project manager didn't have as much time to deal with the external pieces. And depending on who was available, did we have logistics help? How much could corporate do? This job looked like it was going to take my time. So he said, I need a number by tomorrow morning. He said, the clock is ticking, no pressure. Real nice man. I just to this day, really, the whole team that I worked with over there was great. He said, the clock is ticking and we have to have a number and we ready to move forward. He goes, you may tell me that within that 33 days or 32, by the time you give me a green light, that I don't need that long. He goes, I may be wrong, but that's our date. Okay. And of course I walked it and looking back, I still didn't recognize everything, all the challenges. You never do. You can get really good at this and you can really build the ability to look at like what's going to take too long and where the troubles are going to be. There were some challenges that I didn't forecast that made this job interesting, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But I'm going to shorten this up. I called my wife, called Amy, and said, just finished the job. Just had this random thing. Somebody walked across and walked up and asked if we could do this monster of a job. I'd done some big jobs before, but this was kind of different. And this is, tornadoes are different. Our last episode, we talked about Joplin. So I walk around, put together some stuff, and I contact the gentleman, said, I'm going to go back to my hotel, and I'm going to put together some budgetary numbers and some logistics and do some planning. He said, 10-4, no problem. At this point, Joe, my project manager, had already been on the road he had come from another job. So I sent Joe home, sent in a box truck, take it back to close to Charlotte. It's where he lived. I said, you deploy. We're good over there. Checked off, signed off, good to go. Invoice, we'll start getting ready. This was a bid job to me, but we knew we were going to move fast if awarded, and we were trying to figure that out. So looking at everything I had to do, the number that felt right was about $1 million. And so I gave him 1.1 or 1.125. I said, that's a budgetary ROM. There's a lot of unknowns. And he said, 10-4, let's do it. It's the number he had in his head. I love when that happens. So it was like draft up a contract, get it over. We have 32 days. Well, it was going to take me some time to get some logistics there, equipment, people. I started putting together the team. And we got started around day 29. So 2 or 3 days, we worked really long and hard. I brought in a new project manager, Linda. And she was a beast. She was awesome. Linda Bostic, a fantastic project manager that I worked with for many years, retired now, but helped build that company that we were working with from the ground up, was one of the first employees. We get there, we're getting our equipment. We need different types of equipment, but we're not really messing too much with, their GC was going to remove the roof panels and cut the beams that were twisted. And it was pretty gnarly on that side of the building, but we had to get all that food off. Now, you might say, and this was asked, why can't they just demolish the building with all this food in there? Well, it had to get mentioned. They could not risk any of this food, whether packaged or breached packages or not. They couldn't risk humans, anyone grabbing some of this stuff and then getting sick and tracing back barcodes and suing the Smuckers Corporation. By the way, humongous corporation. Knew nothing about them really, other than I love their jelly. But they own so many different brands across countries, and this place was housing a lot of that. So the plan was, I won't get into the really, really deep details, but we had to document what we removed and took to the landfill, and then someone had to be on the other side to validate that it was received, and then videotape the destruction of this, when that in this case was burying this at the secure landfill. And that was 14, 15 miles away over in Mississippi. Memphis in Tennessee is right at the Mississippi line. You cross over. It was a big waste management place. I had to go meet with them and get the logistics worked out, saying we're going to be bringing hundreds of thousands of tons of food, and it needs to be disposed of. And they said, we got it. Okay, so they said, we'll set you up with a rep, work that out. I had to find a trucking company that was going to be round robbing this stuff and taking it back. And we kind of counted how much we had and looked at the days, and we kind of backed into it. We knew we had to get out several tens of thousands of pallets of food. We had things to worry about like weight. Some things weighed more. They own syrup companies. I forgot, they have their own syrup, jellies, peanut butter, flour, sugar. They have all these Eagle brand milk. They had all these powdered and liquid milk. So the liquid pallets were extremely heavy. And so we had these tractor trailer company that was going to dedicate us about 13 to 14 53 footers to Brown Robin. So the validation was going to be, I had a full-time team that was videotaping activities. We had about 6 bay doors, 5 to 6, depending on equipment count. And things were extracting from the building. We had a process in a way that we already mapped it out, which we were going to start pulling stuff, come over, and then load trucks. But so first we had to videotape it, as we mentioned, and then we had to wait. We had to get a bunch of scales. They didn't have those there. Well, we had to know what we were putting on these trucks. So we had scales so that we could measure. But the measurement of weight was also another form of validation. Leave here with 62,513 pounds, generally, besides fuel, but the tare weight of something should get there to the landfill, weighed there, validation with a ticket, weighed the same amount. We also put lock tags on the back. They were numbered. So every truck, and there were probably 500, 600 loads that went over time. All of them had these tags that we each had to order and source that were sequential. And we had log books, we had all this stuff going in. So it's a lot of logistics, but we had to validate. We had security because the neighborhood was trying to sneak in and grab some food. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this food on the surface. We got there were a lot of arguments. The media was there and saying you're throwing away so much food, but there are people that need that. There was that narrative. Why not just send it to the homeless and stuff like that and troops? And they couldn't. They could not risk anyone. While some of the food was non-perishable, people can sue for anything, and Smuckers just had too much liability. So we had security, and it was tight. We had to go through a few different companies, just getting people that would show up. And guess what? If security didn't show up one day or one shift, even overnight, somebody on the team had to stay until we got somebody there. So we had a lot of people. It was just a moving part. But we started that job. We had a big wall board up by the docks. We set up a little office area, built a little room, and we had to peel off. I said, I want peel off how many days we have left. And then we were measuring how much we were taking out of there. So we were doing this in dry tractor trailers. One thing we didn't account for was, first off, weather. We had a third of the roof open, and we knew we had weather, but the amount of rainfall that we were continuing to get in this time of year was flooding the building, mostly on that side. But we had to work on mass squeegeing this over there and keeping the water from over on our side. Now, it didn't work, and a lot of that water migrated over to the rest of the warehouse over a long period of time. So combination of wet floors, forklifts, and the products that we were carrying, there was spillage that was either from our own doing or other doing. There were pallets that were, because of the humidity and open air and no climate control, the structure of some of the stackable cardboard corrugated paper was depleting. So we'd come in and there would be entire towers of pallets rolled over. There's a cleanup on aisle 17 now. So we had pallets of flour and sugar everywhere. And that's one thing. That's a cleanup. We had to send a crew over there. We had a little spot task crew that would do that because we had to get that back into some kind of container so we could take it and dispose of it. But they wasn't all dry chemicals. We had syrup. We had jellies. So now we've got slippery, gooey molasses jelly all over the floors of this place, mixed with water, mixed with forklifts. And we started to have almost it was like a circus in there. Things were skidding around. Our drivers had to get really good at slowing and braking in time so they wouldn't just slide into pallets and stab them. Everybody got a spotter at that point. He really just slowed things down. Now, I was increasing people, increasing equipment. We actually, while we were trying to get the stuff out of the collapse zone, there's no way a forklift was just spinning. We had to get skid steers and forklifts with tracks on them so that we were actually running on tracks and not wheels that were rubber and slippery. We put all kinds of compound down, trying to absorb and make it less sticky, just making a bigger mess. It was mess. It was frustrating. Our team was getting exhausted because we were looking at this 18 days left, and some days went really slow. We didn't get out. We had a quota of how many trucks we needed to move that day. Some days we didn't hit it, and the trucks could only go so fast. There were some limitations on actual time, how long it took to get there, wait in line. There was a line at the landfill. It had to go through a process of someone filming it, lifting up. We were on these hydraulic lifts, and the truck would lower into the pit, and then a tractor trailer a bulldozer excavator would cover all the time. So we had challenges, but we worked through them. Had a really good team. Luis Oliveras was there, Linda, several good operators. We went through a lot of people. Some people had other jobs they got called to because this was not drying. This was not fire. This was not super certification skill level, and we had those jobs coming up, and these were specialists in those fields and their talents. What I needed was more general common knowledge superintendents that could help run things. But retraining someone on how we were running the circus was really a challenge. So we continue to move through, but listen, we found our footing. We got the place dry. We'd go a week or so with no rain, and we're able to get some ride-along Zamboni, tenant scrubbers and push a lot of stuff. I mean, we had to lift those up. We had to get a lift and detail and clean those because we were really getting this equipment nasty. So we're buying a pressure washer, a hot water pressure washer. So a couple of challenges we had. We got a call one day from the inbound at the landfill side of our team saying, "Hey, we've got some trucks coming up short of weight." Like, okay. How short? Some of them a little bit and some of them a lot. And there wasn't every one. It was just like spread out over 2 days. Said in the last 2 days, they gave me a report, out of our 20 loads, 30 loads a day, a third of them had these shortages. It's like, okay. And I said, are the tags on the back getting there intact? Well, they look like they're pretty rough. Are y'all reusing tags? No, we're not reusing tags. They're all brand new. Okay. Well, now all of a sudden, one of our biggest fears that I had not told the team is the trucking company, the security and the reliability and security of the trucking company. And because this was all they were all the truck drivers were coming in like, oh man, look at all this food. There's so much money there. There's so much value, blah, blah, blah. And I was like hearing too much of that chatter. You know where I'm going with this. And I told him, I said, by no means your company was hired to take this from here to there, no stops. Everybody had to fuel that morning. There was no fuel stops, nothing. Our team over there knew when, by radio, trucks were on the way. So they were always measuring the cycle of flow. So we had this problem. I put a team on following a couple of trucks, and sure enough, there were 2 drivers that were veering off course and going to like a big flea market thing. And they were opening up the back and selling some of the food. So we called the police. They were arrested. The owner, it was a mess. The owner of the trucking company was apologetic, but we wondered if we could even continue like this. But the police were involved. These 2 drivers were, whatever happened, I don't think anything major happened to them, but they were fired. We had to face the idea, are we going to meet do we need a new trucking company? And just starting that over we're going to lose a day or two minimum. But we stayed with them just for the job, GGOTO, greater good of the organization. And we continue to load these things up. We have a debrief with all drivers. They know what happened. They know what the risks were. Some of them were super honest. Some of them said, oh, man, that guy's been with my company forever, blah, blah, blah. I know that guy from way back. He, excuses. So we were trying to manage that, but the owner of the company was there and he handled it. But they became up short on finding more drivers. So now we had a low number of trucks, and it looked like, and we had left ourselves with 2 to 3 days of fluff to give them that building back for just the what ifs. But we couldn't have a whole lot of delays. And this was going to be a big delay, and it was going to cut down the number of trucks and take us longer. We could not get an extension without it costing X. And we had signed an agreement of liquidated damages. So we were going to absorb a % of whatever the penalty was for non-performance, which was not getting this job done in time. So we had bid this job. We knew it was going to be, profit-wise, that was all just going to come out of profit. And then eventually, my incentive and the incentive that I had that I was going to be able to give to the team that was working there for a month. I did go home once or twice during this and get a weekend break and a 3 or 4 day break and stuff like that. And I tried to do that with everybody. You're going to hear a theme with me throughout this season. Starting back from 2004, when we had a big hurricane year in Florida, 4 hurricanes, we adopted a process of everyone did 12 days, and then there was a rotation. We found that was the sweet spot before people started getting burnt out. Some people got burnt out before that. We managed it. But 12 days was the automatic, that I don't care really what's going on. 12 days, if in almost all circumstances, if this is on a longer project. Obviously, some jobs are 7 days or so. What's interesting is if the job was going to be a 13-day job, somebody would stay. Nobody's going to leave for day 12. But if this was a month long or longer, you're going to hear them talking about some year and a half long projects. 12 days is when people started to really get into a place where they're burnt out, exhausted, stressed, anxiety, missing home, missing kids, friends and family, and just too much work. Just like too much of the brain was focused on this. Safety issues started happening. People started making bad decisions. Unfortunately, some people would satisfy their stress by alcohol and going out, and that just affected everything and everybody. So 12 days was automatic. People left kicking and fighting. Sometimes they didn't want to be sent home, but so we paid for travel home. Get on a plane, 2-3 days, go back home, get reset, come back on Tuesday, all good. It worked out, and everybody started to know that 12 days was the rotation. So we had some rotation, new people come in. That was always a little bit of a hiccup, but we were working on it. We ended up getting another trucking company that had what's called live beds, and these were 53-foot trucks open top, which was going to be fine, but they had a rolling conveyor style bed on them for like grain and for stuff like that. When I loved it. So then there's no tipping. They can just pull up at a different place and pull up to the same heap, if you will, and turn on the thing, and the stuff just falls out. So we got 3 or 4 of those. I wanted 10 of those trucks because they were more efficient. Again, there was getting to be a long line at the tilt, and then one day the tilt broke, and it held us up for a couple of hours while they worked on it. So we loved this new idea, but we could only get a couple of trucks because they had regular customers and routes. But they gave us, some days we had 4, some days it was 2 or 3. So product starts to go out. We're good. We're back on track. I'm feeling good about this. But then we get to an area that I think we were waiting till the end for. There were, on one section, Smucker's owns oils like Crisco and coconut oil, canola, peanut. They had 86,000 gallons of oil, that needed to be disposed of. Well, there's value to this pure oil. So we reached out to several biodiesel companies, talked through that a little bit with the biodiesel company, talked to Smuckers and see do you have any use of it? They don't. We ended up partnering with a pet food manufacturer that was, they were pretty far away. I don't think they weren't in Tennessee. I think they were in Kentucky or Ohio. And they sent somebody out and they took a sample of this stuff. They put oil, canola oil. They usually got oil from restaurants and a little bit refined, but mostly just used oil. And they put it in dog food for the protein, for the fat, and it made up for their nutritional values they needed. Well, this was pure, and they could really, really, really. There was a huge amount of dollar value to this. The biodiesel didn't work out. I forget why, but any money we made on the reclamation of this oil was going to be put back into the project for the profit. But they didn't want to take them they don't want just 80,000 gallons in 1 gallon, 1 quart, 4 gallon, 5 gallon buckets or whatever it was. There was a mix of everything. They wanted to send a tanker. So now it's like, okay, we have to open and convert and move all of the oil from the containers they're in, the retail, into their tankers. So we fashioned, this is where my Texas engineering came in, man. We fashioned this really crazy system. It worked. But we got some big tubs. We actually got, I'm really going deep and telling you the details here. We went to home and garden places and got these big, heavy plastic liners that go in the bottom, like hard shell for ponds and landscape features and stuff. And we had some of those, and we would drill big holes in the bottom. And there would be a hose at the bottom. So this was elevated. The dock high was down below. So we would have it going down into drums with a pump, pumping it into the truck, because the truck didn't have a pump on it to get it. It was a mess. I don't know now that it was the best way, but it's what we all just, after trying several things. So what we did is we had these tanks, koi ponds. We did the drilling. My team fashioned and sealed the things. Then we okay, we're going to sit here and pour stuff. Well, let's get more efficient. This is what we do. We ended up getting a bunch of chain link fence gates big enough, and we would place them on top, zip tie, strap them down, and then we would go through on our pallets and undo all the caps for one layer and then flip it over. So I had people for days dumping oil, hundreds of gallons a day, dumping it in, going down, go to the tanker. They would get me one more tanker or whatever. We had to keep up with the volume. We did that for days, and it was just like, it was something. But you know what it left behind? A real mess. We got the warehouse empty. We got the oil all done, and the parking lot was a mess. They didn't care about the building as much because that was going to be demolition. Even the slab, I believe, was going to be chopped up and taken out. They didn't care about the parking lot was supposed to stay intact. Well, the property manager said, you can't turn that back over to us with that much oil seeped in. So we had to get all kinds of chemicals, hot water pressure washers, some caustic agents that would degreaser that would seek in. So we did that that wasn't expected. That was a cost. It was eaten into that. So we were measuring how much we made off of the oil reclamation through cost of doing that. And it was crazy. But at the end of the day, I want to say that Smuckers was incredible to work with. Their team, one of the best clients, smart and understanding, but they knew what they were doing all the time. They had, I kept in touch with one of their reps, and she worked she was a chemical engineer or something. I don't know. I was really shocked, but her name was Sarah, and she came down from Ohio a couple of times and worked with us. She was our quality control, making sure things were on track. She was eyes and ears. One time, Mr. Stranger in the Trenchcoat came in, spent a couple of days. We went to a nice dinner with every employee. He was very gracious. He would not let me pay. He served everybody on that job a lunch or dinner, and had a great time. And was really, really, he was appreciative. We were on track. We'd done what we said we were going to do, and we were looking at a national relationship with them. to sign after this. But we did the job. We got this job out, all of the hiccups. And this is the essence of what I want this season to be, is some of the best jobs are the hardest ones. There were challenges. There were frustrations. Definitely people that did not get along with each other on that crew, on that staff. We had the problems with the drivers. We had landfill issues. I'm going back and forth to the landfill. I go home sometimes. I had another project come up that I had to go get started. This one was fine, but then it was one phone call. Something was weird happening. But we did it. We got this job done. We had a hard number that we had in there. It wasn't a T&M. We were tracking where we were at, but we put a hard number on this job because that's what they wanted. So we were at, just like I said, a little over $1 million. We could have probably found some change orders, but we kept working at engineering new ideas and adapting and finding the right tools and the right people and the right processes within the confines of what the project could do. We had the security issue. We had the safety issue. Forklifts, again, I told you they were sliding up the pallets. Well, now they're sliding. They have a pallet full of, powdered milk, and they're heading towards the front to get weighed so that the team could log it and then load the truck. But you had to learn where to start slowing down, putting on your brakes, because if you braked, you just slide, and several pallets ran into stuff. We broke a few scales. People, scary, you almost ran over people because of slipper and sliding. You had no control. You get sideways. It was like black ice in the storms. It was crazy. But you kind of got to learn. We put down some cornstarch all the time and kind of textured up the ground, which had to be cleaned up because that became oily and greasy, and it was a lot of processes there. But this was one of those fun jobs that we really look back, and I'm glad I have an opportunity to have this podcast to talk about this. And I'll tell you what the takeaways are. Success of big jobs, commercial jobs, any project, even residential, are the right people with the right key characteristics. I've been talking a lot about that in Restoration Advisors this week. The kind of people that you want to work with that will put through and endure what they're going through because they believe in the mission. Do the job, get home safe, help the customer. Having the right people. Not everyone has a large company with all the different kinds of people. So you have a smaller company. You need to develop people that are adaptable in multiple different types of projects, and high stress, no stress, low stress, hot, cold. You have a disadvantage because you don't have a big bench, but you have an opportunity to make superstars out of the ones you have. As you grow and you do start at a bench, you have primary leaders who came up in that environment. You've got to have good vendor partners, your equipment company, your resources and access to find the things that you don't normally use or have. You've got to have someone taking care of the logistics for you if you can. We had to move hotels a few times because of the events that were coming in. And that's just, that's really upsetting because people got real comfortable. They were there for a month. They unpacked. They were there. Now you're told you've got to move and you still have to go work a 12-hour day. We were working 12-hour days, 6 days a week. We didn't work on Sundays. So we were losing a day in that month, but we couldn't work 7 days a week. It wasn't possible. And it was becoming inefficient with labor for the overtime as well. But we factored that in to the budgetary number. But we got the job done. We cleared the building. Everybody was happy at the end. That's always funny. Like, I don't know how we got here, but we did. And everyone was happy. We did end up getting a national relationship with Smuckers. I don't think anything really ever came with it. A couple of small fires. They have a lot of property, a lot of buildings and labs, and we had a couple little things here and there. But I'll never forget the grace of the gentleman that hired us and Sarah that came in, and the incredible team that was working there and endured through the ever-changing environment, both the project and the weather. But it worked out, and it really those are the kinds of times where it locked me in and said, this is what I'm probably going to be doing the rest of my life. And here I am starting up CATx, which I want you to look down the link below and get on the waiting list, because I'm starting CATx up later in the year to try to help people develop a team, a division, a part of their company that can do commercial work. Maybe not always big Jumanji crazy jobs like this, but you never know. I mean, we were doing a relatively easy job that any of you could have handled with the right people and the right plan of extracting these things from this smaller warehouse. Somebody walked across the parking lot in a trench coat looking like a Dick Tracy movie and asked us, can you do this thing and win? I'm like, yes, and now. That's the answer. We were a yes and now company. Can you do this? Yes. When? Now. We'll figure it out. Money, we'll figure it out. And I want to help people with CATx develop those companies, whether you're small or you're even larger doing commercial, and say, listen, I think we could be better. Because if you put the right people in place below them, everything will work out. Vendor partners, budgets, good contracting, good customer service, great communication skills. I mean, the communication daily, the report they needed was they needed to know how much was moved out and how many pounds and what challenges, and are we still on schedule? Do we see any forecasted? I mean, they were worried about that liquidated damages, and we were too. We were going to absorb that with them, but it worked out. It always does. It always does at the end. I mean, I like to tell people you're taking an imperfect situation and trying to make it better. So it always looks worse before it looks better. So they ended up later demolishing that building. It was all done, and we were just a little piece of the pie. So that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you have any questions. You'll comment below. But these are the kinds of projects that you, in the time you're doing it, you don't know what you're getting into, and you certainly don't know what the impact is going to be over a long period of time. But here I am in 2024 talking about this project, and it makes me want to reach out to the team that was working there and just say, how you doing? It makes me want to call Smuckers and just talk, but I don't. But these are the kinds of projects that are fun. If you have any specific questions about this, anything you heard, recommendations, what you would have done, I'd love to hear it, because I'm still always learning. That's it for this week. Disaster Podcaster. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.